wonderful conference. The topic of this panel is Tanzania headhunting, but we will not discuss only the human remains in the German collections, but we'll also take a little broader view on the German colonial period in what is today Tanzania. I would like to quickly introduce myself. My name is Konradin Kunze. I'm neither historian nor activist. I'm a theater person, and it's actually the first time for me to lead such a panel like this, and I'm very pleased that I was asked by Berlin Postkolonial to do so. This has to do with two theater productions I did last year with a theater company called Flynn Works, and both plays dealt with topics from the colonial past, the German colonial past. One was called Skull X and dealt with human remains, and the other one was a Tanzanian-German cooperation called Maji Maji Flavor, which we also showed in Berlin and in Dar es Salaam and Bagamoyo and in Kassel. And when we were doing research for those two plays, I met these two wonderful people, our guests for today. Well, Mboro, you already know, most of you, because he's not only guest, he's also host today. He hosted this conference, and he's a co-founder of Berlin Postkolonial. His full name is Mnyaka Sururu Mboro. He was born in Kilimanjaro region in Tanzania, but I think you spent more time now in Germany than you did in Tanzania.
Almost equal.
Almost equal. Mboro does city tours here in the African quarter. Very, very well done tours, very informative. For those who haven't walked with Mboro through the African quarter, I strongly recommend to do so. And please give a warm welcome to Mnyaka Sururu Mboro. And I'm very happy and pleased and honored to have this guest here. His name is Chief Emmanuel Zulu Gama V, and he's the paramount chief of the Wangoni community in Songea, Ruvuma region in Tanzania. And it is the first time for Chief Zulu to speak outside of Tanzania, to come to Berlin. And he organizes every year on February the 27th at the Maji Maji Memorial Museum in Songea the commemoration of the Maji Maji War. He is also in his family, he has some links to the colonial past, because the brother of his grandfather was hanged by the Germans during Maji Maji War. Chief Zulu Gama, I'm very happy that you're here and that we can have the opportunity here to hear your voice for the first time in Germany. Please give a warm welcome to Zulu. So now, before we go into the details of the colonial crimes and also your family history, I have a general question to you, Chief Zulu. So, do ordinary people, like school kids, ordinary people on the street in Tanzania, still know about the German colonial past in Tanzania? Do they remember it, and how do they perceive it? How do they think about it?
Thank you. Well, in Tanzania, especially in Songea, they do remember all things which were done by the Germans, because there are things which are there standing. I mean, you can see them, and you get information how the thing is there. So, by the help of, say, elders, all guys in school, they know it.
So, if you ask a school kid in Tanzania what is Maji Maji, they will have an answer.
Yes.
Mboro, what about the Germans? You live long enough in Germany to know a little bit about this topic. do they know about their own colonial past?
I will say not. They don't know, because my experience which I had, for instance, at the beginning, very beginning, I used to go somewhere like in a pub to have a beer, not really to have a beer. I was just only looking to talk to the people. And then you find that, oh, when I come in the bar there, no one will talk to you. I just only ordered my beer, and then after some time, they have the courage, and then they started asking me, who are you? What's your name? And then I say, my name is Mboro. Where are you from? I say, I'm coming from Tanzania. Yeah, but where is Tanzania? I say, Tanzania is in Africa. Yeah, but Africa, you know, it's so big. Where is it exactly? So I thought, to make it much more clear and easier, I did mention the former Germany, East Africa. And then you find all of them, they were somehow surprised. And he looks to his neighbor, did we have colony in Africa? No. He said no. But the other one there, Mr. Hans, said, no, you know that? Yes, indeed, I think we had colonies in Africa too, but for quite a short time. And we were totally loved. So it is where then I started thinking where I am. Because I don't know anything about the love which they were given, because anyway, at home, the story starts from my grandmother, and I didn't know anything about that. And when I went to the school too, in the books, it was not anywhere there that the Germans, they were loved. Just only from the first day, it was just only wars.
Yes, you're speaking of school books. Actually, I have to admit that I didn't learn anything in school about the colonial past. I think it changed at some schools now, but I had to travel actually to Tanzania to hear for the first time about the Maji Maji War, which I felt very ashamed, and it is one reason I'm sitting here now. So I think this is a very interesting thing, because yesterday Benedict Savoy talked about the stolen memories, referring to stolen artwork from the former colonies. And I think now that we have the stolen memories here in Germany in our museums, we still didn't gain the memories. We could not read them. And on plus, we forget our own memories. It seems like a gap of knowledge that somehow was created. Mboro, what do you think is the reason of this gap of knowledge, or this misinterpretation of this time?
Yeah, up to now, the experience which I made, it is that I found that the German government especially, and even the nation itself, doesn't want to talk about this past history, because it wants just only to hear how good they were and. But this, no, please, don't talk about that. They don't want to hear about it. And when I'm saying that, they don't, it is that, for instance, in 2005 and 2006 and 2007, we decided, we, Tanzanian community here in Berlin, to remember the Maji Maji War, to remember 100 years of Maji Maji War, to remember those who lost their life in Maji Maji War. And we found out after this march, this memorial march, we found out, yes, in the school, it's not even taught. And the Germans, they don't want to talk about it. But then is when we started, with Berlin post-colonial, to see that we have to have an instrument where these things can be talked about. And that's why after this march, we formed Berlin post-colonial.
Chief Zulu, what kind of stories were told in your family? Like, you also have a family history. Your family history is attached to the Maji Maji War. What kind of stories were told in your family? What do you remember of that?
Well, the story behind which my father told me is that when his father's brother was murdered. Well, it was a sad story because he was being collected there, tied with ropes from the hideout of the war. He was sent to the governor and locked. You know, a chief being locked in a jail is something which makes, I don't know how to explain myself, which makes a kind of sorrow. And by that time, they took the whole family. They locked fathers apart and sons and daughters apart. After a time, they said no. Took the sons back home, leave the fathers here. So my father and the other members of the family were released, leaving his father there. Try to imagine what was happening.
Were there also stories told about the first contact with the Germans? Like, were there stories about this when the Germans came for the first time to Songea and Ruvuma region?
Well, they came with a team. They called it mission. They were 5, according to my father's explanations. A priest, a geologist, and army officer, politician, and a sister. That was their mission. So they came there. They met the chief by that time, called him Puta, who was hanged. They said, oh, we are coming from other part of the world. We want to spread our religion here. And what is your religion? He said, oh, we've got no religion, but we've got a spiritual habit. So kindly, my grandfather showed the spiritual house. And after a time, there came words that that house is not going to benefit people because the God of that house is not the real God. So one day, Father Franciscus made his judgment, burnt that spiritual house, and from there carried the hatred and well, I don't know how to explain, but hatred in their hearts. So that grew up, and people now were afraid because their gods have been burned down. But the action of the chief said, oh, you burned down this? Okay, take him to the governor. Father Franciscus was taken to the governor, but between the bush, he was killed by chief soldiers, 4 soldiers. And when they were turning, say, oh, this information will be leaked. So the 4 soldiers again were killed. So Father Franciscus had gone with 4 other men. So that was how it felt.
Mboro, what was the situation before the Maji Maji War broke out in Tanzania? How was the daily life of the people in what is now Tanzania?
Anyway, what I know is that always I do talk about my grandmother because really she taught me a lot. You find that when they came, especially in Kilimanjaro area where I come from, people didn't want to accept that they are our colonial masters, or how you would like to call them. So you find that then they were forced to accept that, but they didn't want to accept that. Then you find from the beginning, I mean, when we started with German colonialism there in Tanzania, it started in 1885. But then you find right already in 87, 88, and 89, there were a lot of people against to accept the German colonialism. So you find that then the Germans, what they started at that time, they started something which is called Strafe Expedition. Yeah, disciplinary excursions or punishment excursions. And in fact, they were not disciplinary or just only punishment. Really, they were wars. So you find that very early in Tanzania, it started already from somewhere in 87. And then there were even, is when the Germans sent Mr. so-called Wisman to build the Schutztruppe, protective force. I don't know whom these protective forces were protecting, but anyway, nowadays I know they were protecting their colony. So he's the one who started building this Schutztruppe. And you find, building this Schutztruppe, he had to take people from Mozambique, the Shangani people of Mozambique, the Zulu people of South Africa, and the people from Sudan, because they knew that if they take people within the country, they will not turn against their own people. So then you find, then they started with so-called excursions from a region to a region. And what me especially I remember in Kilimanjaro, from my own grandmother, it is when this Mr. Wisman came up to Kilimanjaro area and he started a war with the chief sinner of Kibosho, where even this man in his books admitted that he did lose some soldiers. And you find this kind of excursions were going on. Later on, it come to a chief. Mangi Meli. Mangi is chief in our language. He was totally against the German colonialism, and he fought very bitter against them. At the end, he didn't succeed to win the war. Then he was caught by the Germans, and he was hanged with his 6 fellows. And this hanging, it was a kind of a ritual. The Germans, they were sitting there, drinking their beer, and enjoying how is he dying. Because even this ceremony, and I'm sure the knot which they did put there, it was a kind of not so tight. And really, you find this ceremony took more than 6 hours, and my grandmother was always very proud of it. This man, he was so strong that he didn't die within these 6 hours. And then they shot him at the end, and they chopped off the head of him. This is very well known in my area. And this head was sent here in Germany. I think we have been always talking since yesterday about the human remains, and it was sent here for racial researchers.
Yeah, we come to that point in detail a little later about Mangi Meli. But first I would like to ask Zulu Gama, the Wangoni people then joined the Maji Maji War. How did the message of Maji Maji came to the Ngoni people, and what was the reason why they joined the war against the Germans?
Well, Maji Maji War started at a place known as Kilwa, east coast of Tanzania. It went on, somebody called Sulemani Hombo took the medicine to Songea, and because the chief was angry, and after that burning of his spiritual house, he was angry, and hatred grew into his heart. He received the medicine, he drank it, and gave to to his soldiers. So after that, the first revenge was to burn the church of the Germans. The church of the Germans is located today behind the hospital of Peramio. So after burning it and killing 3 white people, they said, "Oh, this medicine is powerful." So from there, it spread to all sub-chiefs and their forces. You know, at that time, sub-chiefs had any kind of forces to defend themselves. There were 4 main chiefs: east, west, south, north, and the chief himself, called Inkosi, was centered. So if anything happens at the nearby area from the chief, those sub-chiefs start first fighting. So because of this, the chief himself has taken the medicine. It was easier for his troops to be engaged in the war. So from there, the war spread all over the poles, I mean in north, south, because, you know, everyone was angry. So it went on fighting, because if you tell somebody, let's go because the chief was said that we have to go, without reason, they will state. But after that burning of the spiritual house, people were now angry and anxious and everything like that. So they were everything in their heart and their body were ready to fight.
How did the Germans then react to this war? What was their strategy to end this war and suppress the resistance? Mboro?
Yeah. You find the Germans, in fact, I always combine these 2 big wars, the Maji-Maji War in Tanzania from 1905 to 1907, and the Extermination War in Namibia from 1904 to 1908, because you find the strategies which the Germans were using. It is really they wanted to exterminate people, but they didn't pronounce that in Tanzania. In Namibia, it is clear they did pronounce that. But you find what the strategy they use here in Tanzania, it is so very well known, burn earth, verbrannte Erde. So not just only they were going on with their weapons, with their guns or machine guns, what they did also, they burned each and everything down to earth. So they didn't care whether in their houses or so-called huts, there were children there, or old people, or women or young, or cows or goats. They did burn each and everything down. And even they try to push earth to the water holes so that people doesn't have anything to drink.
I have a quote here because I think it is very clear that the Germans were knowing what they were doing. And there is a quote from Graf von Götzen, who was governor of so-called German East Africa at the time. And he said, as its last option, the Schutztruppe, which is the so-called protection force, had to use the cooperation of hunger. Burning down villages, fields and food supplies might seem barbaric to the distant observer. This method of warfare was not just the most promising one, but also the only practical one. According to me, military actions alone will be fruitless. Only hunger and hardship will be able to force people into final submission. This is what the governor himself wrote in his memories.
Yes, thank you.
Good. Can we now come again to your own family history? and also this is a very important day, not only for the Wangoni people, but for the whole Tanzanian people, the 27th February. Each year you commemorate the victims of the Maji Maji War at this day. What exactly happened at this day?
Well, at the 27th of February each year, we do celebrate or we do commemoration of our ancestors. What we do there is that we notify all the sub-chiefs to call their people to come at the Maji Maji Memorial. We have got the memorial house there at Songea. And the day of action, I mean the 27th, we start from the hanging place. It is about half kilometer to the burial grave there. So we meet there. Before meeting there, we invite other people, other Ngonis from Malawi, from Mozambique, and Zambia. Last year from South Africa they came. We joined together there. I tell them the history, why we meet there. We worship the hanging place, and we make a rally to the grave there. When we reach there, we tell the Christians, I mean Christian leaders and Muslim leaders, to go and take prayers there. At the time, sometimes we have army what?
Defense force.
Yeah, to join us. So they play that sort of trumpet beat, and after that, leaders go on making speeches of sorrows and something like that. After that, then we say, okay, we prepare local food, natural local food, which is sorghum flour and dried meat, which was used by those days. We eat there, and from there we dance the local dances of sorrows. After that, then we return home.
Can you explain a little more what actually happened? What was the story on what happened on the 27th of February in 1906? There were over 60 leaders of the Wangoni hanged, one by each other. Your grandfather told you that he had to watch what happened.
It is a sad story because when the time comes, they were 60. The first day, they hanged 4. Before hanging, they collected all nearby people, I mean, those who are around the area and the relatives of the victims, to sit almost 50 or 75 meters from the hanging place. And they were forced to look what is going on. If you bend your neck, you are being whipped. The thing is that you see what is happening. So the first day, they hanged 4. And after that, they took normal prisoners to take the corpse to the grave, which was dug by those prisoners normal prisoners who were made mistakes in normal mistakes. It took 1 month to dig that grave. So the first 4 was put there, looking sideways, so that the vacants can be fit for all those 60. They took a little bit of soil, almost an inch or so, to cover the bodies. Then after 5 days, they hanged 40 for the same day. I mean, 4 for each running time. So After those 40, they laid there again, the same way, sideways, put a little bit of soil. Next 5 days, 6, until all the 6s were gone. From there, according to my father, people were crazy, seeing someone being hanged there, especially your father or your grandfather or your... sorry.
Sorry. We have a picture here. This is a memorial at the hanging place, actually, listing just these are only the first 30 people that are hanged. They are the names. Some of them were baptized just before they were hanged. The first name, you see Mputa bin Ngweze Repazi Gama. That was the Nkosi, the overall chief. And then you see in the second line the Christian name he got, like Hadrian. I don't have another picture where you see a lot of those being hanged refused to be baptized in the last days. But this is the place where the hanging took place, and then there's this Maji Maji memorial where you have the mass grave. Chifu, I have this picture here from the commemoration ceremony. We can see you here standing there. This grave is a special one. This is not at the same place of the mass grave. It's the grave of Songea Mbano, who was hanged separately and buried separately. Can you explain us what this little separation in the grave means? What is it a symbol for?
Songea Mbano was a general. I mean, say a general because he was the war leader. After hanging those 60, Songea Mbano was the last one. They wanted him to join the administration of the Germans, but he refused and insisted that I must be hanged because all my comrades have gone, and I can't talk to you because all my mates are gone. They tried to convince him for almost 3 days, but he refused, insisting that please hang me or stab me to death. Anyway, I don't like to live in this world. By that time, though, the big grave was covered. So they hanged on the 4th day. And after hanging, because that was covered, so they dug another grave and put him inside. But after 3 days, they opened it. They chopped his head, cleaned it, and put it in the box. I don't know where it is, but I've heard it is in Germany. The place, I don't know. So after that, they engraved again. So when they were burying, they said, this man has no head. So we have to put the sign that where the head belongs and the body belongs. So here has meaning that the body was at that side, and the head which is missing is that side. That's how it stands.
Mboro, this is not only the only story from Tanzania that you can hear of skulls missing. There's a very famous one, the one of Chifu Mkwawa, who was also fighting against the Germans long before Maji Maji War started. Some of you may have seen the film yesterday where it is portrayed, but we can actually, there are rumors if it is the right skull or not, but we can actually talk of his skull being returned to Tanzania. How did this come about?
So, about Chifu Mkwawa, is the one who is known all over Tanzania, and Mkwawa fought the Germans before the Maji War. And really, it took bitter years, more than 7 years it took. And then the end, he found himself that he cannot win this war. But he knew the Germans, especially the officers, and with their soldiers, they were so brutal that he didn't want to be tortured. So he killed himself, he shot himself. But then you find the commander, Tom von Prince. He was not convinced that he has already shot himself and dead. He wanted to see him. Where is he? So anyway, he was brought there. And then what he did, he chopped off the head. And as far as I know, and as far as historians has already proved, that he stayed for some time with the head himself. Then he was forced, or whatsoever, there was a kind of that he handed it over to the people concerned here in Germany when it's supposed to be the museums. Which one, under which under collection it came, it can be, it was visual collection or lotion collection, but for us, we Tanzanians, we really don't care which collection it was, which collection it was. So, but then funny enough, which up to now, I don't know really how came that in the Versailles Agreement of 1919, it was mentioned there, and they have even paragraph 246, something like that, that this skull must be returned to Tanzania. And nothing happened, because when the Germans lost in the First World War, they lost also the colony, and it was taken over by the British. So in 1954, I was already born too. And I do remember, it is when we started the political party known as TANU, Tanganyika African National Union, which was to fight for our independence, because we were no longer a colony, but so-called mandate under the UN. So at the same time, I think, and I'm convinced that the British, so that now these people are really now totally organized, they are going to get their independence, and we don't have this sub-colony here whatsoever. So then they tried to please us. And then they asked for the skull here in Germany, and they got a skull, which is supposed to be Mkwawa's skull. And this skull was brought to Tanzania. Here, the British people wanted to silence us down. Look, people, we are not as the Germans they were, where they were all permanent wars and all this and this. We were very good to you. So you don't need to fight for independence or something like that. And here, look how good you were. We are bringing your chief back.
Mm-hmm. Apart from those skulls, which were definitely trophies, there were a lot of other skulls also collected, not only of chiefs, but of other people, ordinary people. And I just have one quote from Felix von Luschan. You know the name already. He's connected to the, he was part of the Völkerkunde Museum, the Museum of Ethnology. He he was the one who actually acquired the Benin bronzes, which we heard of yesterday, and he was the main person who collected skulls for the Ethnology Museum. And this is a message to all Germans, especially in the protection force. He had handouts how to procure anthropological material, and he says, any occasion to rescue a large number of skulls from being destroyed in the ground or in a fire should be zealously used. In certain circumstances, a very superficial cleaning is necessary. Sometimes this entails only the removal of flesh and drying. The rest can be done in Europe. Parcels should be sent to the Royal Museum of Ethnology in Berlin. And the museum will soon be newly sorted in an honorful way and will then be the most beautiful and great monument for our Schutztruppe, for our protection force, Felix von Luschan. Why were those scientists at that time so obsessed with collecting skulls from all over the world? Mboro.
Anyway, what I can say here, it is that, and I do believe, because also I lived a part of colony, because you find all these so-called priests, or the whites who were there at that time, they were very, very racist. So for me, I do believe, as people they've been talking at home too, even right now too, that the Europeans, when they came to Africa, they didn't believe that we are capable of doing anything against them. And they were so convinced themselves, I don't know where they got this kind of convinced, I don't know where they got it, that we are not equal in thinking. Even, I know some too, even to today too, who always abused me on the streets without knowing anything. So you find this kind of a syndrome. It was already in them that we are totally inferior, and when they find no, they are not that inferior the way we thought of, then I think it is then they were interested on our heads to check how far we can think, whether beyond them or under them.
Nowadays, when people talk about the skulls, especially when the museum themselves talk about those skull collections, they talk about an Unrechtskontext. We have heard this word earlier, unjust context. Yeah. I would like you, Zulu Gama, can you imagine a Tanzanian handing over a skull to a German, might be missionary, colonial officer, or whatever, out of free will?
I think it will be very wise to hand over that skull, because, you know, there are two parties. The first party is his relatives. The second party is communally as Angoni. And you know, that man was a great man, great warrior. A great warrior in that part of Tanzania, Songea, is a man of honorarity. So if that skull comes home, it will change the people's feeling, and will make what? Will make something which is equal. For example, at this February, I invited the ambassador of the then Germany to Tanzania, Mr. Yeah. He came there. I saw everything which you were doing there, and I took him to my home village, saying, look, here was the courtyard and everything like that. The thing behind was to make something which can be alive, and to bring his thinkings that that was not a joke. It was a reality. When you speak of 60 people in one grave, is a reality. And he saw I and my member of the family there. So that was, I thought it was a good time to him to know that how we feel And I said, oh, that was past, and what we need is friendship. Don't be afraid of us. Although it took almost 3 to 4 years to invite the ambassador there, but I'm glad that by this year he came and we were together there. So to me, it's a progress of one step to have a close relationship. And I think for this relationship, things we require, like that skull of Songea, will be solved.
Well, I think our Namibian guests might know Mr. Kochanke because he was ambassador earlier to Namibia, and I think he gave a very hard time for you. All of them. Probably doesn't matter which one it is, yes. This Mr. Kochanke came to you, he was the first official from the German side ever to speak to you, is it right?
Yes, yes. He was the first. When we saw each other, well, first we admired each other, and I said, no, don't be afraid, and I'm not afraid. Come closer. We hugged each other and say, welcome at Songea.
But this Egon Kochanke is now retired, so he also said he cannot do much for you because he's now leaving his post. Well, maybe this is also the reason why he came. He himself told me, well, sometimes, and I think it's true, he's a historian by himself, he cannot talk in a way he would like to talk because he's also, like, he has a job with the German government. But anyway, we are running a little bit out of time. Still, Mboro, I would like to talk with you about your research on the skull of Mangimeli, because it is a long journey, and you tried much. What did you do, and how were the German institutions reacting to your
So
claim?
you find this skull of Mangimeli. We people from Kilimanjaro, we went to the ambassador of Germany in Dar es Salaam in 1968 to ask for it. And he said he's going to ask back home here in Germany. If it is here, we will get it back as we got the Mkwawa's skull. But anyway, after a year or so, he said, no, it is nowhere to be found. And again, me myself, when I had a scholarship to come here in Germany in 1978, I went home to say farewell to my grandmother, who used to tell me all these stories and she mentioned to me, you know what I've been always telling you, now you are going there where it is and you bring it back. By then, she was still alive. After 2 years, she died, but she told all my family members not to tell me that she's dead because I would be somehow confused not to work on the skull and on my studies. So anyway, I started inquiring information from here and there and there. We came nowhere. And in year 2000, because anyway, they did mention too, just only an ordinary person, or even we as grandsons of those people who are lying here, we are not even allowed to see them. Anyway, that has been already even talked today too. So we looked for a scientific people here in Germany in 2000. And they went to the visual collection. They found their skulls from Tanzania between 70 and 80. And the one skull supposed to be a girl's skull belonging to this family of Mangimeli, Makindara, because I know the whole history, but it's not the one which we were hunting for. And in some other places like Bremen and End, they were not allowed to go in there. So you find still up to now, we are hanging there. Just only, I know now at least there are 70 or 80 of them, which now even I can talk to my government and to the people to try to work on it. And I believe that what they are telling you, your governments, look here, we are the ones who are concerned. who lost these people. Those days, they were chiefdoms. We didn't have this government which we got after independence in the 60s. It wasn't there. Which government was there? It is the same government which is here in Germany. And they're the ones who took them, and I think they are the ones has to look for them, because we know they are here, and bring them back with their own cost. Thank you.
So you told us since 1968 people... 78. 68 is
68.
true, no?
68.
People from Tanzania tried to find the skull. This is the grandson of Chief Mangumeli, Isaria Meli. He's an old man, and I think it was his life task too to find this skull. And we can basically say with Benedict Savoy from SDA, why does it take so long? Now they promised to start research to give back around 1,000 skulls, but they said, first we have to do this research and we have to know how they came into the collection before we can really say this is an unjust context, this is Unrechtskontext, and give them back. Do you think research is at all necessary, Mboro?
For me, I don't think totally it is necessary, because these skulls are here. They are here not legally, they are totally here illegally. And we know these people were chopped off, even after being tortured. We know that, and we can evidence that too. So, I mean, this what they are looking now for, buying time, having time. I don't know where they are heading us to, because I even remember those ones, the scientists who went to visual collection, the man who was responsible in the charity, he told them, yeah, we are ready to give them back, but some would like to hold here. And I think this is what is going on, because now, these skulls now, we have been hearing a lot of people, now they are becoming as a business. So really, I think the research, it is just only will help us to know whether now this belongs to the Gamas or this one belongs to the Melis and that's only this can help us.
One last question to you. Now, we earlier heard about this global human remains trafficking network that existed at that time, because obviously there are not only skulls in Berlin in those collections, but there are skulls in Bremen, human remains, probably in Saxonia, in Freiburg, there are skulls. Do you know, or does anyone in the room knows how many skulls from colonial time are in Germany and where they are?
No. Me, myself, no. And I don't think in Tanzania that we know that. Even in Namibia, I don't think so too. So, and you find that even in Tanzania it is worse, because when the German, they left at the end of 1918, because the British threw them out, all of them. And they took all the papers and they did, or whether they did, they destroyed them, I don't know, but they took each and everything. In Namibia, again, another case, because they have still archives, which did exist at that time, but in Tanzania we don't have.
So I would like to open now to the audience for some questions. I would just say something, a little information, because we earlier heard about the skulls of Ova Herrero and Nama being in the American Museum of Natural History in New York. I know for sure that there are not only skulls from what is now Namibia there, but there are also, for example, 3 Wachaga skulls. I don't know the exact numbers, but this is also one institution, also connected to von Lushan, because he was the one who collected them personally, apart from the official selection. And when he died, his widow sold it to New York. So this is a collection about roughly 5,000 skulls, not all of them probably from the colonial times, but definitely there are skulls from other colonies there. So any questions to Chifu Zulu or Mboro from the audience? Back there is one question.
Thank you. It interested me to know what happened to people who refuse to be baptized by the missionaries. If one Tanzania refused to be Christian, what happened to him?
Well, nothing happened. It was your choice. They say, okay, now you must die, and there's only one God who you must be baptized if you want to see that God, otherwise you die like a dog. They said that.
So I can add something to it too. You find they were forcing people to become Christians. And I'm talking from my own experience, even after independence, they were trying to force people. So those ones who refused to be a Catholic or a Protestant, then they don't have any allowance to send their children to the school, because the schools were mission schools. So if you want your child to go to the school, then you have to become a Christ. And the people already knew that without education, we cannot fight this colonialists. So what remains there, you are forced. Then you agree to it. But there were those ones who totally refused. They didn't care. And then you find that they were waiting. When now they are on the dying point, they come, they baptize them in the name of the Father, of the Son, of the Christ, Amen, and he dies. So even they wanted to prove to us, although he didn't refuse, but at the end we caught him.